This is the Rebuild Procurement Podcast. I'm Tom Finn, bringing 15 years on the client side, procurement, finance, category management experience in large and small cap orgs.
And I'm Alan Veek, a procurement geek on the client service side of the street, and I've assembled a team of superhuman procurement professionals doing managed services at a little company we called Summit.
All right, Alan. So we have a few things to talk through today. We'll see how we go through. One is a post, I think you'll pull it up off Twitter, which will dive into a little bit of, call it like the salary experience, golden handcuffs maybe, and thoughts around that. It was a little bit of a good way to think through certain things when it comes to jobs. Then as one does, if you're not talking about AI, you talk about Apple and Google phones because they just had releases. And then on the back end, right now we have teed up 30, 60, 90-day plans, how those work, what our thoughts are, and we'll touch on those on the back end. So,
I like it, a good lineup.
Yeah. So you had mentioned the tweet. I actually responded, and then, but yeah, do you want to talk through this for those that are listening?
Yeah, why don't I just read it off? This is from
Sure.
Moses Kagan, who's a real estate guy in Los Angeles, and he's talking about that market. He said, "It's been rough speaking with friends in the LA entertainment business lately. Productions have dried up, which is a combination of interest rate hikes, strikes, filming being much cheaper elsewhere, consolidation, downsizing at studios, etc. Very few people are working. Many are vacating their apartments or selling their homes and leaving Los Angeles. Many are leaving the business entirely. It has driven home the following points to me. If you require someone else's infrastructure to do your job, for example, the financing, the distribution, etc., that they provide, the deeper you go into your career, the more senior and expensive you are, and the more obligations you take on, things like family and mortgages and homes, the more vulnerable you are. And if the above describes your situation, you need to save like crazy when the times are good." And I liked this because it certainly resonated with me in some things that I'm seeing in the marketplace, even in procurement. So, everybody talked about how post-COVID we had this hot job market, but I knew, and Brandon inside Summit, Brandon and I both saw several senior people who were in the upper end of their career, probably the last quarter of their career, and they're rather expensive, super experienced, but it's the expensive side that kind of led them to months upon months, even years upon years of unemployment as they were looking for their next gig. And these are good people. These are people, many of whom I'd worked with before. I certainly knew the quality of their work. They were great at what they did. They just couldn't find a spot in the musical chairs that is kind of looking for a new job. And it reminded me of something that somebody told me early on in my career. They were later in their career, and they said, basically, for every year of experience you have, you need to budget at a minimum a week of job search time, just because you're looking for that rarefied spot, that high salary, and not many of them exist. So it's just going to take you a lot longer to find it. And, so I thought about that when I read this post, because I think it's good advice on thinking about when you become dependent upon someone else. Obviously, if you can go out and start your own company and hang out your own shingle and make your own dime, then you've got control over where your career goes. You got control over where your compensation goes. But as long as you need to be employed by a big company, you're behind an 8-ball. You are at the whims, I think, as you put it, Tom, and I'll toss it over to you now. You put it very nicely, of the whims of the spreadsheet gods.
Yeah, I mean, I think of this is maybe a little too data oriented, but I think it's just directionally correct that when companies make decisions, they do so in a spreadsheet. And like, if the calcs don't work, then it doesn't work. So this could be building new things. It could be hiring new people. If your company is doing a good job, they should be managing their costs. And you really do have to consider yourself you have to think through how someone looking at a spreadsheet would view a situation. Many times is why procurement folks lead with savings, because you could do the math and say, I'm saving more than my salary, therefore, but that doesn't always get tossed into the spreadsheet. If you're a procurement person making $50,000, that's different than someone making $200,000. And Alan, I do think through somewhat often about just in the world of remote work, how easy is it to just send my job to a lower cost country? I think a lot of people need to think through that, and then what's the value add to the organization by having you in that position. So I was actually giving a little extra thought, and I'm kind of taking this to a different a different place. Um, when how globalization is happening, especially
Hmm.
within, call it like the white collar work, right? So if you're sitting behind a
Yep.
computer, like consider yourself in this in this realm, whether you're sitting in an office or at home. What's the difference between you and someone sitting in any other country? I was Let me know your thoughts on this. For me, there's a language aspect, which within certain countries, some people in different countries have better accents than me, right? In
Right.
English, like from a
Yep.
first. So that's, but it's an important one. Then there's the hours, right? If you're on the same time zone as me, if you're on a different time zone than me, that's kind of the second piece. And then the third is cultural. How much do
Yep.
you know? Like, how much can we relate? Like, if you're Americans, then no matter where you are in the country, you kind of have that. Like, there is a security aspect from the US or, England or Poland or Asia, whatever it may be, that might just be better to have you in country. And maybe that's the third, the security piece. But how do you feel about that comparison? Because I would say, just to Moises's what his tweet was, I do think it's like what he references is not happening in LA right anymore. It's so darn expensive.
Yep.
They're just going elsewhere. You can go to Europe, you can go to Thailand, you can go get some cool scenery in the background, many other places. Atlanta. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's interesting. The direction that you pushed that made me really think about, in our business, managed procurement services, oftentimes companies that are on the other side of the upside down U-shaped curve, when they're on kind of the maturing and the dying side of the corporate spectrum, I think they have to look to outsourcing to low cost countries because they can find that right mix of language, hours coverage, and culture at a much lower cost. But they don't have a choice. They've got to figure out a way to get weight off of the sinking balloon, right? The sinking air balloon. So I think that those sort of companies in that sort of phase of the life cycle of a company, they need to go offshore. But it's interesting in our business, there's a whole push to stay onshore with a lot of these services because that third piece, the cultural piece, matters so much. You think about your conversations with stakeholders. So you're a superstar category manager. Think about the conversations that you have with your stakeholders. They are hesitant to do business with you, even though you're one of them. You're inside the business. You're in theory working on their behalf, but there's kind of this adversarial, oftentimes an adversarial sense that procurement's going to slow me down. You overcome that, of course, because you put stakeholders first, like a good customer service organization should. But as soon as you push your role over to the Philippines or over to India, man, your stakeholders have none of that. And so we've found at most of our clients who are not on the downward slope of the corporate life cycle, but are kind of on the upward swing of the corporate life cycle, or at least stable, that they want to keep stuff onshore. And the good news that I've found is there are cost advantaged resources in the US, especially if you allow yourself to take advantage of that remote piece that you were talking about, right? Obviously, when you're in the heart of LA, heart of San Francisco, heart of Austin, Texas, heart of New York City, cost of living is just gonna drive things way up. But when you can hire somebody in Richmond, Indiana, right on the border between Indiana and Ohio, hey, cost of living's great, and you can find a lot of great people, university educated, postgraduate degrees, you name it.
yeah, yeah. No, and I think the ability to trust, like, that is a big piece, which is what a lot of companies go through just when outsourcing to begin with. But I do think that a lot of that still happens the in the spreadsheet first, and then you almost have to push back to your point of what are the benefits, because I think, especially on the downward trend from a life cycle of the organization, It's kind of how much can we squeeze either to be just a
Yeah.
little bit
Right.
profitable or like to, milk this cow,
Yep.
where you don't necessarily need the best internal customer service if it's just kind of a product that's just taken away off your hands because it's a commodity or whatever it may be. But I do think from an individual perspective, sitting within an organization, you always have to bring your A game. You always have to stay ahead of people. You always have to have that value that you're demonstrating so that you never get caught up in that spreadsheet. It's
Yeah.
okay,
That's
Alan,
right.
okay, Tom, okay, whomever. You guys take them out of the equation. They're over deliverers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. But I think even if you're an over deliverer, the point of this post on X was the deeper you are in your career, the more expensive and the more senior you are. And these obligations, they pile up, right? You're like most vulnerable when you've got kids on the verge of going into college. One of your biggest, most expensive times in life. You're probably in your late 40s or 50s. The whole point is you are super vulnerable at that point. And I think that would do people well to pay attention to that. I certainly kind of passed through that spot. I kind of feel like I'm on the other side of it now. But Tom, you're approaching it. I wonder, do you think
Yes.
about it?
Just in the crosshairs.
Bingo, you're coming up.
Yeah, it is. Appreciate you bringing it back because I remember early in my career I worked in refineries in oil and gas, and it's a commodity industry. So refineries, if oil goes down, refineries get squeezed. There's a lot of it's super supply and demand related, and I remember being the cheap resource that was
Yeah,
over delivering at the time, and it was
super safe.
sad to watch because there was
Yeah,
folks that had spent their whole career with that specific company, and I mean companies don't really want to get rid of people, they almost have to. So it really is nothing generally personal. It's very much a spreadsheet exercise, like a lot of the
yep,
studios are probably doing within LA. They say I could either pay $150,000 here for these roles, or go to Atlanta, Georgia, to Tyler Perry's residence. I think he's in Atlanta, and shoot Walking Dead there.
yep,
So those, let's just sort it. You just get a list. ChatGPT can help you out with that. And yeah, I think those decisions they've forever happened, and they'll continue
yep.
to happen to the extent you get more expensive. You become your own liability.
Yeah, I think that's right. And maybe I'll take this to a place that is a new and interesting place too, which is that same spreadsheet exercise happens not just with employees inside a business, happens with suppliers to your business. So, I do think our job as good procurement professionals is to constantly be eyeing that value line in the spreadsheet that says, okay, how much does this supplier cost me? And what sort of quality are they bringing? And it's the combination of that cost and that quality that says, okay, here's the value proposition that this supplier represents. And if you're sticking with to use the terms of this post again, if you're sticking with the more senior, the more expensive, the deeper suppliers that you've been with for 30 years, oftentimes those guys are fat, dumb, and happy. And they're raking you over the coals on margins. It's the job of us procurement professionals to always be trying new sources of supply and measuring that line. Just like if they push production out of LA into Atlanta, they're going to look at the quality of the output and say, hey, is this as good as it was in Atlanta or as it was in Los Angeles, or is the value still higher than it was in Los Angeles? That's the question they should be asking. We should be doing the same thing as procurement professionals. They're just procuring actors. We're procuring suppliers.
Yeah, the best way to start that is always get all the data together and do that big sort. Right, who are you spending the most money with, and then the least money with. A lot of the mature orgs are there, but a lot of folks are starting off. That's step one. Just get
Yep.
your spend, pull in your credit card data from whatever your Capital One business and your JP Morgan Chase, and get whatever version of QuickBooks you have, and try and get it all in one spot, and then see where you're spending your most money. Just like you're doing your own internal review of, okay, yeah, it's now $25 for Netflix. I thought it was 18. That happens all the time.
All
That
the
happens all the
time.
time.
Yep.
You take your eye off the ball and you don't realize what happened. So that's with that step one. Then you start having those conversations, and a really good way just to touch base on is this a good deal or not, is just to get a few alternative quotes for something very similar.
That's right.
Yeah, whether it's services, just have it quoted. I mean, think of it like your house, where if you're going to get a new roof on, or if you're having someone cut your grass every week, every 2 weeks,
Get a quote.
just call two other suppliers, ask them what it costs. And of
Yep.
course, as you get a little more further into the important things within your org, that maybe is a little more difficult. You have to spend more time building out that scope to get the clearer apples to apples comparison. But it could be as simple as that to starting off.
Yeah, that's right. Or even as simple as just asking. I had somebody who provides financial services to Summit, our company, and they came back and said, we want to renew this year. And I said, hey, budget's a little bit tighter. Can you do a
I'm
little
not
bit?
sure
Can you
I
sharpen
do.
your pencil? That's right. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I appreciate
Let's
that.
talk about this.
I don't know if I
Yeah.
do. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's have a conversation.
Well, I knew they were up against quarter end, and this was important to them. So I said, can you sharpen your pencil? And lo and behold, they came back with a 7% discount just for asking. It's beautiful. Pay less
Yeah,
just for a quick question.
that could happen on multi-million-dollar contracts too.
Oh, easily. We just did a multi-$100,000 contract for one of our financial services clients of ours, and our young superhero contract manager saw that the price went from $50,000 to $150,000 for the next 3-year contract, and he said, "Hey, wait a minute, what's this all about?" And they called the supplier, and the supplier said, "Okay, well, let's talk about it." Ended up saving him 58 grand, a cool
Yeah,
58 grand, just for asking, "Hey, what's going on here?"
yeah. Let's talk. You want to talk? Okay, here's 58K. Do we have to?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, we do, because now I feel like that 58K is lowballing. So let's have.
Oh,
I want to
exactly.
see this a little bit more in depth here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you don't
the
want to
question
say
of
it.
why matters. Like, is Sue? Can you walk me through that? That's a
Yeah.
simple go-to. Can you walk me through how you came up with that? And then usually it's like my finance team told me to. Okay, and then you can
Mhm.
sell your own story a bit. This is why I shouldn't be charged this, and then it ammo to get that price down.
Yeah, that's right. You've always got a story. You can always ask. You can always work on it and do better.
Yeah, but asking is a very simple. There's a I know we took this from one spectrum, one area, one side to the other,
Are
but
you surprised?
I know that we are meandering on. This is why we have an agenda. But there's this guy. I know we're talking Moises Kagan. There's this other guy, Noah Kagan, and he wrote a book. I've listened to him for a while. It was on I listened to Tim Ferriss. It's like they're Austin buddies kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he started this company AppSumo and whatever was number 13 at Facebook until he got fired. He has his own little story for why you should listen to him. But one thing for folks that are uncomfortable with negotiations, and there's always like a losing ask, but it's kind of to put yourself in the situation of, if you're going to get a cup of coffee, just ask if you could have 10% off. It's super uncomfortable. I don't know if I've ever even done
Right. Practice.
it. Because I know it's like one that is not worth putting myself out there, because I know how to ask now. So I'm like, I don't
Yes.
feel like feeling that way automatically. But it is just to put yourself in the mindset, I think, is even more important than doing the ask. But then you do need
Yep.
to enact it throughout your day. Just to the point of asking can get you 10%, 58K, $200,000. I mean, you do the
Bingo.
math. So
Yeah.
just
And
ask.
I do, let's keep meandering. Damn it all. I did read, and it might have been in that book Persuasion. It might have been something on Twitter, but I did read that when you attach a reason, no matter how banal the reason is for asking for a discount or asking for something, period, oftentimes that's enough to get it for you. You just have to you have to give a little small reason. So you could say, "Hey, things are tight in the Veek family. We need a little help here." And next thing you know, somebody takes pity on you. Yeah, okay, I'll give you 10% off your cup of coffee.
It does happen. That's interesting. I do it all the time, and it's usually quite genuine which if you have genuine, if you're being genuine with it, then it's even more clear. But that's like something, okay, I can relate, right? It opens them up, because in a lot of cases, folks going into budget season, you're not going to get it all. Stakeholders won't
Right.
get everything. You just share that the ask was made, didn't get it all. How can we work?
Yep.
We still need the full amount of what we initially got quoted, but we're 20% less. How can we
Yeah.
make this work? And they're like, all right, and then you invite them into the problem solving. Well, we can't give you
Yep,
that
that's right.
100% piece of it, but we can probably get to like 90, 98%, even for 20% less.
Just ask.
Yeah. And then just ask, and to the extent your hands are tied, it makes it all the simpler to negotiate because you have what you have.
That's right.
So just like the Veek family, if it's tight, then okay, how can we work around this?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Love it.
Okay. Well, I guess maybe just to uh, to button that one up, as you get more experience, you should be getting more money. But as you get more expensive, you become vulnerable too. So just be mindful of that. And it's probably good. I think one reason, no, not I think, I know one reason, Alan, that drove me to have this conversation with you is to expand my thoughts, but then also build a network, right? I see myself going nowhere for a long time. However, I need to meet more people. Uh, and I like to meet more people. So you and I hit it off pretty good. And I feel like as we get some folks to talk through, we can bring alternative perspectives to my mind, to my life, and then also meet cool people. I think people should meet more cool people.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many cool people in the world. You can't possibly meet them all, but you should endeavor to meet as many of them as you possibly can. That's a little bit of the reason why we're doing this podcast. This is
For
going to be a
sure.
fun growth experience for both of us.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see how see how much of idiots we look like at certain points and the feedback that might push us off. But I feel like it's mostly going to be positive. That's where I'll keep my mind. All right. So speaking of something that they probably thought was positive, we'll give our feedback to it. So Apple, today's the 10th of September, 2024. So Apple released their iPhone 16. I think Google released theirs, I don't know, within the past months. You're more of a Google guy. I'm more of an Apple guy. Because I noticed the first time we texted, I got the green bubble back. I was like, oh, okay. I'll still talk to him.
That's right. We're not going to play well together. Uh-oh, look out.
Yeah. Alternative perspectives of life. Perspectives of life. But oh, how one judges so quickly, right? Yeah. I already knew you were a good guy. But I think where we both might be taking this, and then it might meander again, but just around the past iterations, Apple, this like just the high level, the big change, I think it's better battery life and, faster chip. But the idea for Apple here is the software side. So they're going AI, so like an AI button. I don't know if it's going to come with like 17 buttons on the side now, but maybe be up to 3. So just like continue on. But it's one of these things where it's like, at what point does the next iteration matter? And do you need to buy it, or can you wait? I'm not sure what happened with the Google phone. I feel like they're actually a little more innovative.
Yeah, no, I would say they've become clones of each other. They are carbon copies of each other. So Google's pretty much the same. Google also just released their new phone. It's the 9, so 9th generation of their phones. I think I'm on 8. So I'm not due for an
I think I
upgrade
have a
until we get to
13
10.
max.
13, yeah. So you guys are higher because the iPhone
No, but
came
13
out
out of
earlier.
16. I'm revs
Oh,
behind.
you're
You're
lower.
more new than
Yeah.
me for yours.
Yeah, I do like to have my gadgets be up to date. But it was fun. I was this weekend, first week of NFL football was, of course, watching my Stellars beat up on those Falcons. And the TV commercials were all about the new Google phone. And what I found interesting was watching the commercials. It was like somebody dropping a phone humorously and cracking the screen. Verizon, I believe it was Verizon, now has a plan with the Google 9 that no matter how you damage your phone, no matter what happens to it, you drop it in water, you drop it on the ground, it cracks the screen, cracks the back, cracks in half even. Just take it into the Verizon store. No questions asked. They give you a new one.
Whoops, it cracked in half.
Don't know what happened. Sat on it.
Kids.
Kids. Yeah, somehow it ended up in the blender. Don't know how that happened. So what that brought to mind for me was, number one, that's pretty convenient. Number two, I thought, okay, this tells me that these phones aren't moving off the shelf very fast. So they're coming up with all kinds of innovative ways to push them. So I do think as the phones get better, as our economy dips a little bit, as people's private budgets get a little tighter, that all hurts the ability for Apple and Google to sell these new phones, to move them, and to be able to charge the prices that they'd like to charge for them. So they're getting to be innovative, which is kind of fun, kind of interesting, good for us consumers for sure.
Yeah, I mean the math that those things, the way that works out when you do the product buildup is essentially they're building insurance now into the phone.
Mm-hmm.
So, like from a pricing standpoint, I don't know what it was last year versus this year, but I wonder if then they'll be taking worse margins too. That's interesting.
Yeah, and think about it. They can do this because if they've gotten their supply chain right, the last step of supply chain is reverse logistics. So taking something like a damaged phone from the Verizon store back to the Google or the Apple factory and fixing it and then selling it on the refurbished market, right? So now
Hmm.
you have a whole secondary market to be able to sell these phones a little less expensively, but still at great margin. You just get resale value on those things for these companies. So it's quite an interesting little ecosystem, I think, that's developing. Yeah, you brought up insurance. Have you ever bought insurance on any of your devices
Or household pets?
or
No,
household
devices no,
pets?
but I have paid way too much money to petinsurance.com
Oh my gosh.
over the years. It was reimbursed at some point, so then it makes sense, right? Because you can't
Yes,
necessarily
yes.
reimburse. And then I'm sure I've paid for it for a
What,
number of years.
what
Uh,
happens? What happens if your dog swallows your phone? Who's liable? Which insurance has to pay?
sounds like a win.
Exactly. That
A
is
win in
great.
that case. My dog's quite tiny, so that'd be very unfortunate.
That'd be funny.
My dog's like
I have
14 pounds.
Yeah, they'll eat your earbuds. I did have at a company that shall not be named. I had a large client in Austin, Texas, and the chief procurement officer there. I was out at dinner with him, and he was telling me about his dog. It got cancer.
Mm.
This was in the late '90s. His dog got cancer. Took him to the vet. The vet said, "Oh, yeah, we can get that tumor out of there and do a little radiation treatment." And he said, "How much is that going to cost?" And the guy said, "Yeah, it'll be like 25 grand. Do you have insurance?" And the guy said, "Yeah, I got insurance. A nickel shotgun shell."
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And I remember thinking, they make them tough here in Texas. I love it.
Yeah, I know people that have spent. I know a person that spent more than that on their dog via
Yeah.
cancer.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't think they had dog insurance, but even if they did, the limits on those things, you have to follow those policies. They're like the worst,
The
and it's
worst. Yeah.
totally not worth it. It's like impossible unless your dog has like 15 ailments all within 1 year. That's the only
Mhm.
year from again, focusing on spreadsheet math, right? And
Yep.
taking feelings out of it. Like you never get a return on that investment when it comes to your dog. You're better off putting it in
Nope.
a savings account and just like that amount every
Yeah.
year from when your dog's a
That's
puppy. Maybe you can have it for the first 2 years because puppies do dumb things. After 2 years, put that
go on
in
your own.
yeah,
Yeah.
put that in a savings account, open an E-Trade for your dog, and invest it in
Make
the
money on that.
S&P.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's a
Well,
better investment.
that takes us right back to where we started, which is, yeah, don't buy that insurance. The
Yeah.
insurance is there for a reason. The companies are
Well,
making money.
but there are certain people that should. They get very lackadaisical with their phones, and
Yes.
uh, that might be worth the $5 or $10 per month for certain people. I've had the same again. There's a again, 3-4 years I've had this phone.
Hmm.
Uh, and I find there's alternative solutions, right? Just putting the little screen protector on that little glass, like you might have like a bubble on there, but it's better than having if you don't do it right. But it's better than paying $5-10 a month for
Scratches,
spending $5
cracks.
once.
Yeah,
Huh?
that's right. Yeah, the scratches and cracks.
Yeah, exactly. And then and you get the OtterBox or whatever other one you want off Amazon. So anyway.
Anyway, good discussion.
Alternatives. We're talking to alternatives here. I am curious though, Alan. It's probably something I won't bring back to this conversation, but might dig into it a little bit. Just what makes me curious. These are the things I think about when these topics are brought up about the go to market for Google with Verizon, because it makes me very interested the back office conversations that go into, let's pitch it as insurance for the phone, and who takes the cut of what. There's all of those contractual negotiations that go into everything. They go into
Mm-hmm.
everything. When you look at your
Of course.
Mac, when you look at your Dell, when you look at your TV, like the screen, you have the conversations around the negotiations on the screen, on
Yep.
the the Q and the W letters on there. There's the conversations around everything, the printing associated with that. How much should it cost? All these things cost money, and folks do it, and companies do it. It's very interesting to me, like the
Yeah.
cord being plugged in to how I have my computer plugged in. Like it's all negotiated.
Yeah, for sure. And boy, what a rich, diverse ecosystem we live in, right? So many companies, so many products, so many things.
Yeah, it's probably forever going to make me crazy, some of those things. All right, so the back end conversation that we had teed up for this. I don't know if have you done these before, Alan? 30, 60, 90-day plans.
I know of them in concept, but I haven't ever done them myself. I thought about it when I started Summit, like maybe I'll do a 90-day plan so I can figure out, what do I want to accomplish in my first 90 days? Then I looked at the long laundry list and said, it's going to take me too long to organize that. I just got to start doing it. So
Yeah.
short answer is no, I haven't ever really done one, but I know of them in concept.
Yeah. And I think they're good just for when you have almost new hires or you're joining a team. It's not necessarily something you always have to do if you're, managing your time properly. It kind of just becomes part of your agenda of work. But I do find it good for organizing, because one thing, I'm probably going to get my saying wrong, but when you bring on someone new or you join a new company, like the first 30 days, you're figuring it out, right? You're trying to, like, what do I do here? After 60, you should be doing decently by yourself. After 90, you're kind of off and running. Then 6 months, like, no one's asking questions. People are asking you questions at that point. So
Right.
there's kind of like that's the like super high level, but it is always good in my view, and tying this in for folks that are maybe starting something new, or gonna. This is also very helpful for having new hires coming to your team. For the first, I'll just tee this up first. So usually you put it in some version of a document. I'm a fan of PowerPoint for things. In my mind, I
Yep.
kind of think in, this isn't good for blog writing, but I think in Excel and I think in PowerPoints.
Yes.
Like my
Right.
mind is like screenshots, and it's kind of like math and
That's why
VLOOKUPs.
you're so successful, Tom, because that's how the
So I have
corporate
so few
world
friends, maybe.
communicates. Yeah, right, exactly. But that's how the corporate world communicates. It's all about
Yeah.
spreadsheets. It's all about PowerPoint.
I didn't start off that way, Alan. That's where I've ended up. I now just thinking, I think in PowerPoint presentations. But if you think for the first 30 days, and I'm looking at something right now that I could probably share a version of this separately. I can't share it right now because there's something on it. But the first 30 days is more about the person having a proper understanding of how it's done today. This is how I view it. Like
Mhm.
how you might have a SharePoint website, you might have things stored. Like your folks should be getting in the groove by doing their own research, like seeing what procedures there are, if there are any, if they're not. Also taking mental notes of things they might want to improve. You want to talk with folks, set them up if you're the manager, intro to business unit teams and different KPIs, things of the nature they're focused on. You should also try and get a handle on spend and who it's spent with, just to internalize. If you can start having conversations after 2 weeks, perfect. Or if your folks can, perfect, but maybe unlikely. And then, so that's sort of the first 30 days. Always assume those folks are going to get up to speed, or you're going to be getting up to speed. So don't get too
So
bent
this
out of
is
shape.
so this is like the first 30 days. You're talking about a category manager, something you would kind of
Let's
hit
do
the
that.
ground, and this is what you
Yeah.
do. Okay, good. I like
Yep.
that.
Yeah. Understand. But it really goes into everything.
Yeah.
It also goes into new initiatives. If you're taking on some new responsibilities, and if it's different than what you're doing, take that into consideration. That first 30 days, then, or after for the next 60 days, so call it month 2, you should have a total understanding of what's happening. You've done the research, you've had the conversations. Really, your person that you've brought on, they should be pretty good in month 2. if you're doing category management, let's focus there. For the category management, you should have a list of all of your current suppliers at that point, right? You
Yep.
should have pulled in that spend. Yeah, let's take this direction, Alan, of you don't do category management today. You're going to do it over the next 90 days. Let's take it there. Because let
I
me let
like
me
it.
reset. For the first 30 days, you're going to figure out how you're spending your money. It's kind of to our
Yep.
earlier conversation of get all the data in one spot
Mm-hmm.
and 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 have something to look at and something to have conversations with business unit stakeholders about. For the next 60 days, you should at that point have a total understanding of your spend. You should be able to have a conversation with the CFO how you're spending, how your company's spending that money. And you should have a list of all the current suppliers at that point. From there, you want to create a process for the main needs of the users. So you're spending your money on this side, they're being used for some reason. So
Mm-hmm.
how does that match up? If there's any opportunity that could be initially seen, you might know some suppliers, insert conversations, and then have that communicated back out to, how different KPIs are hit. So that's month 2 of your category management, ramp up here.
I'll be the 3-letter acronym, the TLA COP, KPIs, key performance indicators.
Okay, yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
acronym. Uh, so yeah, so your key performance indicator. So what your company cares about and what they may be measuring.
Right.
The month 3, because we're going to stop at month 3, you should have the alignment and implementation plan at that point. So it's great. Some things might, if you're starting something, you might have to have quicker wins. So things happen still in month 1, month 2, but month 3, you have something to present out. Clear map of the opportunities. So if you're an analyst, it goes the level up. You should be able to talk to whomever your manager is. You could be brought in as a senior manager, even as a director. You should be able to speak out those opportunities, have the list of your current contracts, the strategies associated with them, if they're strategic, not strategic. Again, my mind that goes into an Excel. You need to have that data to be able to spit out, and then have alignment on the strategic path forward with the different teams, as well as start reaching out to the vendors and get that process kicked off for whether it's going to be benchmarking, some RFIs, if you're going to do RFIs like request for information, request for proposals, so quotes. So you need to start working with your stakeholders to start saving some money. And if you're ramping up category management, I've seen where, again, we talked about asks earlier. If you formalize those asks with competition,
Yep.
you could save in some cases 40%. So there's
Huge.
definitely a lot of opportunity with the proper preparation. In this case, giving it 90 days. And if you have it mapped out, when your manager, your director, your CFO can see there's a plan, they'll back off a little bit, even if they're super intense, because they
Yep.
see where it's going. They can critique and push back. You incorporate, but then you move forward once you have that alignment. What are your thoughts on the 30, 60, 90 days
Yep.
for category management?
I like that. I like that a lot. I could tie it into our first conversation, which is you will be showing the value of your, if you're that senior person who can do that well, that you're expensive, you'll be showing your value in the first 90 days. And that's what people need to see. They need to see immediate impact. Nobody wants to wait years and years and years for the build that never comes. But that sounds, I like the way you lay that out, because that sounds very doable. As a matter of fact, it makes me think of a story. I was out in Boise, Idaho with a client recently, and there was a category manager who'd been given one of their bigger categories to just focus on solely. It was the fleet spend. They had about $100 million spent on fleet, and they just gave it to Brad Benton as this guy. He's super super smart category manager, and he'd spent probably 60 or 90 days with this category. And he got up in front of the group of us on the whiteboard and gave us a chalk talk. Back in the old days of the old chalkboards, this was whiteboard talk. And for 60 minutes, we were spellbound as he told us about the fleet industry that we had no idea about. And he talked about the structure of the industry, he talked about who they spent with, what the suppliers were, what was going on to the supply base, how things were changing inside the company, about how they bought this. He had us spellbound as he walked us through his strategy for controlling spend in this huge category. And it was just masterful.
Yeah, as you go down, I mean, and that's a lot of thought. And I'm assuming whether or not folks realize that this is the process that you go through, right? You first have to understand and then you kind of build the case, then you present that case out. And this just gives a timeline associated with it. And 30, 60, 90 days is generally accepted. It's kind of made its way into a lot of cultures that that's kind of the ramp up period. If you're past 90 days and you've done nothing, you're even if you're being paid a little bit, you might not be worth when they do that spreadsheet. You may fall off that spreadsheet. So I think it's always important to prepare plans, to have plans to introduce thoughts, ideas, things of that nature. So
right on. Good discussion. I like that.
Yeah. So all right, is that it?
That's it. That's a wrap.
All right, Alan.
Another one in the can, Tommy.
Yeah, another one in the can.
Give us a bye-bye.
Talk to you later.
All right. See ya.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebuild Procurement Podcast. Check in weekly for new episodes and subscribe for alerts.